So real quick, I want to talk about something I sort of glossed over in the first video when we talked about our domain and ranges for all of our inverse trig functions. And it only has to do with our cosecant and secant, or our inverse cosecant and our inverse secant, okay? And it deals with the range of these two, okay? Now, we did a great job building our domains and ranges by looking at our original functions, inverting them, and then thinking about flopping the domain and range. But one thing we sort of glossed over is when we limit the domain of cosecant to negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, there's actually a value in there that cosecant doesn't take on. In other words, the question is, where is cosecant undefined? Well, remember that cosecant we can think of as 1 over sine, which means anytime that sine is equal to 0, 1 over 0 is undefined. Well, sine is equal to 0 at 0, which means cosecant is technically undefined at 0. Which means that arc cosecant, or the inverse cosecant, is also undefined at 0 for the range, right? Because remember, domain becomes the range. So technically with our range, we should say not including 0, okay? Now, that's kind of a funny little distinction. We could build our range to be negative pi over 2, comma 0, union 0 to pi over 2. But it's kind of it's a really small distinction, but I did want to talk about it briefly just so we don't get the wrong idea. We need to do the same thing with our arc secant. So coming back to our secant, remember that we limited the domain of our secant to 0 and pi. And so what I need us to think about is I need us to think about where is secant undefined in that domain. Well, secant is 1 over cosine, which means anytime cosine is 0, secant is going to be undefined. So where is cosine 0? Well, cosine is 0 at pi and 3 pi over 2. In other words, at pi, right? This is, sorry, I said that wrong. My goodness, it is early in the morning, I'm sorry. Where is cosine undefined? Think about a unit circle, Megan. Whew. Okay, right? Cosine is our x value, so it's going to be undefined up here and down here. That's pi over 2 and negative 3 pi over 2. So cosine is 0 at pi over 2, which means secant is undefined at pi over 2. So I'm just going to write that here, undefined at pi over 2. And remember, we limited this domain, which gave us our range. That means this range is also not going to include that pi over 2. So I'm just going to add not including pi over 2. And technically, we could then rewrite the range as 0 to pi over 2 union with pi over 2 to pi, but it's not 100% necessary. I did just want to kind of throw that out there, though, since as I looked at this morning when I came in after recording videos last night, I was like, oh, something is missing. So I apologize. I'm not going to re-record the other video. I'm just going to put a little addendum on it. So thanks, guys.